Okay, I want to lean now into munitions supplies, and I want to bring in CBS News contributor Aaron MacLean, a Free Press columnist and the host of the School of War podcast. Aaron, great to be with you. At the beginning of this war, the Trump administration voiced confidence in our weapons supply. And I want to be clear, the concern isn't really about the current war with Iran, but for future wars, possibly with China, that could be on the horizon, which is a whole different ballgame when it comes to military power and strategy. China knows all of this. We know that. So what does the U.S. need to do when it comes to weapons production now?
Right. So some of the numbers you see circulating out there are pretty concerning. You know, potentially we've shot something like a quarter or a third of certain kinds of cruise missiles that we employ, up to a half of certain kinds of air interceptors that we fire. These are the often extremely expensive rounds fired into the air to intercept Iranian ballistic missiles and even drones. Sometimes these drones, of course, can be very cheap in return. So you're absolutely right. There is potentially a period of vulnerability that we are entering because of the depleted stocks of these weapon systems. But there's a bigger story about it, too, which is the math of how this conflict has worked, considering it's been a conflict that's been fairly limited in time with Iran, 4 to 6 weeks so far of the shooting phase of the war. If you take that math and you take it to the Pacific and a, God forbid, potential conflict with China, which could be much more intense, much more longer, we would have run out even without the depletion that we just saw over the course of this war. So this is a red flag, flashing light, warning signal just across the board.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm curious, Aaron, for our viewers, how are weapons made in this country? And in modern warfare production, is it more about quality over quantity necessarily? Or when it comes to China, you got to have both?
Yeah, I regret to report that weapons are made in this country slowly. That's largely a consequence of the post-Cold War era consolidation. We have some problems baked into the system now that really go back to the early 1990s, when the Pentagon essentially went to what was a pretty massive, pretty expensive, pretty complicated and diverse defense industry and said, you guys aren't all going to survive. We're not going to be paying these kinds of bills anymore. You need to consolidate. So you saw, dozens of major defense companies shrink to just the handful of major companies that we have today. So what does that mean? It means you have single points of failure. It means you have single production lines where you wish you had 2 or 3 or 4. Just across the system, you run into problems like this. And you meanwhile have a Pentagon that prioritizes basically everything but speed and adaptability in the way that it buys weapons. So you do end up with a system where we slowly produce very high quality, very exquisite, very expensive weapon systems, but we don't have enough of them. And frankly, even if we started to do all the right things, there's no way to produce enough of them in any kind of reasonable timeline, which means we do need to be looking at how to balance these expensive systems with the cheaper, attritable mass, the cheaper drones, the kinds of stuff the Iranians, the Ukrainians, the Russians are excelling at.
Yeah, I want to bring that up because, you mentioned this earlier, and just now you saw the U.S. utilize these less expensive kamikaze drones. Right. I'm curious, though, when it comes to production or just what they're able to accomplish, are those weapons more effective than, say, the larger, more expensive missiles?
No, unfortunately, generally speaking, the more expensive, more exquisite stuff is more capable. It goes further, or it's stealthier, or it's faster, or it delivers a bigger payload in more extreme conditions. So of course, obviously, if you have an extremely important mission or a complicated target, you're going to want access to that sort of stuff. But you have to face reality that realistically you're never going to have enough of it. And so to invoke Vladimir Lenin, quantity can have a quality all its own. We need a lot of quantity of the cheaper stuff. And then for different kinds of targets, not to get too technical here, but you'll mix the kinds of systems as you're going after different kinds of targets using tactics that will evolve in the years to come. This really is the future of warfare. There's a theoretical understanding of this in Washington right now. There's just not yet enough fast action.
So, Aaron, I gotta ask you, if we went to war with China next week, would we be ready?
I think we're in a period of real vulnerability here. Look, I mean, you have to balance that against the potential scenarios. For example, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, to take the most dramatic one that everyone talks about. That's not an easy situation for them. If you look at the distances involved, Taiwan's about as far away from the coast of the mainland as Normandy was from the United Kingdom in World War II. So imagine D-Day, essentially, but into the full teeth of Japan, the United States, Taiwan, etc., assuming that, diplomatically all these countries were aligned in fighting. You wouldn't want to have done D-Day into the full Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine of 1939. The Chinese wouldn't want to attack like that. So they have problems of their own, but we're running low on some stuff and we need more of it.
Aaron MacLean, great to talk to you.